somewhere between work and sunset. He was 41 when he realized that love had quietly disappeared from his life. Not in a dramatic way. No divorce, no heartbreak, just an absence. Like a song that used to play and one day stopped, leaving behind only silence. His name was Mateo, born and raised in Barcelona. He wasn't poor, but not rich either. He had what most would call a stable life. A small apartment in Sant Antoni, a steady job as a logistics coordinator in a mid-sized company, and a 9-to-5 rhythm that ruled his days. Wake up, coffee, metro work, lunch at his desk, come home, cook something simple, watch a series. Sleep. His friends said he was too normal for today's world. They meant it kindly, but it still stung, because these days, normal wasn't enough. Mateo saw it everywhere. The statistics, the apps, the social media chatter. In Spain, there were more men than women. And among the women he met, most seemed to want something he didn't have. Not wealth, necessarily, but status, ambition, charm, edge. He had none of that. He was polite, careful, quiet. He'd never been to Bali, never posted gym selfies, never started a business or mined crypto. He worked, paid bills, and tried to be a decent person. But in 2025, that felt like being invisible. And yet, even invisible people have moments that change everything. It was a Thursday in late May, one of those Barcelona evenings that makes the city feel like a living painting. Sunlight slipping through narrow streets, laughter spilling from terraces, the smell of grilled fish and red wine in the air. He had just finished work and decided to take a detour through Barceloneta Beach before heading home. It wasn't something he usually did, but the air was soft and the sea looked almost golden. That's where he saw her. She was sitting alone on the sand, shoes off, notebook in her lap. Blonde hair that caught the last light, a calm posture, no phone in her hand, rare these days. Mateo walked past, then stopped. Something about her felt familiar, not because he'd seen her before, but because she reminded him of something he used to believe in. The possibility that life could surprise him again. He stood there too long. She noticed. "Do you want to take a photo of the sunset?" She asked in accented English, smiling a little. He blinked, embarrassed. No, sorry. I was just walking. Then you should walk slower, she said. The sunset is fast. He laughed quietly. Her name was Mila, from Slovakia, here on a week's vacation. She worked as a financial analyst in Bratislava, a 9-to-5 life much like his. Excel sheets and deadlines, she said, rolling her eyes. I came here to remember what silence sounds like. They talked for half an hour. About small things. Beaches, food. How both hated dating apps but used them anyway. She was 34, curious, intelligent but not showy. There was a kind of simplicity in her that felt rare. When she got up to leave, she said, "If you walk slower tomorrow too, maybe we'll meet again." He smiled. "Maybe I'll even bring a coffee." The next day he was there. And so was she. They walked by the sea. Two ordinary people in a world obsessed with noise. They didn't talk about dreams or destiny, just about work, stress, parents, the feeling of running in circles while everyone else seemed to fly. Mila said something that stuck with him. People think love happens to the free ones. But maybe it happens to the tired ones too. The ones who still show up. Mateo looked at her and realized he hadn't heard something so quietly beautiful in years. By the fourth evening, she had only 2 days left before her flight. He knew he shouldn't get attached, but he also knew it was already too late. They sat at a small bar near El Born, sipping wine as the city hummed around them. She asked about his life, not the facts, but the feel of it. He told her the truth, that he'd spent years doing everything right, studying, working, saving, and yet, somehow, he felt he'd missed something essential. "Everyone says we should invest," he said. "In stocks, in property, in ourselves. But I only invested in surviving. She nodded slowly. I understand. I do the same. I thought I was building stability. That sometimes it feels like I built a cage. He looked at her. This woman he'd met by accident, who spoke his thoughts like she'd been living inside them. You know, he said softly, it's funny. I thought finding love would mean finding someone perfect. But maybe it just means finding someone who understands your quiet. Miller smiled. Then maybe you found her. Her flight back was on Sunday morning. They promised to stay in touch. Everyone says that. But this time it didn't fade. They called once a week. Then twice. They didn't flirt much. They just talked. About rent, taxes, bosses. The strange fatigue of being good but not special in a world that rewards spectacle. He sent her photos of rainy streets in Barcelona. She sent him little videos of morning trams in Bratislava. Neither of them believed in fairy tales anymore. But somehow this felt like one. Not the glittering kind, but the real kind, made of patience, time, and choice. 3 months later, she visited again. He met her at the airport with the same awkward smile, the same calm eyes. But this time, they hugged like people who already knew. Something had begun, quietly, without either of them forcing it. She stayed a week, then 2. They rented bikes, cooked cheap meals at home, talked about everything and nothing. They weren't young, weren't rich, weren't influencers. They were just 2 tired souls who had finally found rest in each other. He asked her one night, "Why me? You could find someone wealthier, more exciting." She laughed softly. "Because you listen. Because you look at me like you see me, not a version of me. And what do you see when you look at me? Someone who still believes in love, even if he doesn't admit it." The following year was hard. Distance tested them. Plane tickets were expensive, and neither could afford to travel often. They both had jobs to keep, bills to pay, but they didn't give up. They scheduled calls, sent postcards, learned each other's language little by little. When he had a bad day, she'd message, "Remember, even if it's not easy, you're living a story someone else would dream to have." And when she doubted herself, he'd reply, "You're not behind, Mila. You're just walking slower." And the sunset waits for those who walk slower. A year later, she got a job offer, remote position, based in Barcelona. She hesitated at first. It felt risky to move for love. But then she thought about how rare it was to find someone who made the world quieter. When she arrived, he met her again at the airport, holding a small bouquet of sunflowers. "I told you I'd bring coffee," he said, smiling. "Just took me a bit longer." She laughed, tears in her eyes. That night they walked along the same beach where it all began. The sea was calm, the city lights soft. They didn't make grand promises. They didn't need to. For people like them, people who worked hard, paid rent, followed the rules, love didn't come with fireworks. It came like this, steady, earned, and real. Years later, if someone asked Matteo how he met his wife, he'd always smile before answering. "She was a tourist," he'd say. "But I think I was the one who was just visiting. Until she found me." They never became rich. They never built an empire or went viral. They just lived. Modestly. Together. Every morning, they left for work side by side, carrying coffees, laughing about the metro crowd. Every night, they cooked dinner, argued about silly things, planned small trips. Sometimes they'd sit on their balcony overlooking the city, and she'd say, "Do you think we were lucky?" And he'd reply, "No, I think we were ready." Because love, he learned, isn't about finding someone who fits your dreams. It's about meeting someone whose quiet matches yours, and then walking together. Slowly, as the sunset waits. Epilogue. In a world obsessed with shortcuts, with fast money, fast fame, fast love, Matteo and Miller built something old-fashioned. Something rare. They built a life, and though they never posted about it, somewhere between their morning coffees and evening sunsets, They found what most people spend a lifetime chasing: peace.